Hi lovelies, welcome back again. So in today's tutorial, I'll be showing you how to make this Milkmaid Peplum dress. If you like what you're seeing on your screen, please do well to watch this video to the end. Like, share and subscribe to my channel if you haven't while I get started. So I'm going to begin by drafting out the pattern for this dress. So I have my pattern paper here, and from the top I'll come down by 0.5 inches, which is going to serve as the starting line and also as the shoulder line. And from there I'll take the rest of my measurements. I'm marking 10.5 inches, which is my shoulder to my bust point, shoulder to my under bust 14 inches, shoulder to my waist 17, shoulder to hip 25, and then the shoulder to the first full length 29 inches. So what I mean by first full length is I'm making use of two different fabrics for this. So this rose pink is going to be under like a skirt, and then the lighter pink is going to be on top. So the length of the light pink fabric is 29 inches. So as you can see the indication with the arrow there, this is 29 inches, but the entire full length of this dress is about 38 inches. So I'll go ahead and just use a ruler to connect the line straight this way. Don't worry, as we go on, you're going to understand better. And now moving on to the edge of the paper, I'll go in by 1.5 inches. This 1.5 inches is for my button allowance. As you can see there also, there are some buttons on the light pink fabric, and that's what I'm drafting out here. So I'm going to use 1.5 inches as the button allowance for this. And from that button allowance line, I'm going to take the rest of my circumference measurement. So on the starting line, I'm going to mark my shoulder to shoulder divided by 2, which is 7.5 inches. I'll mark it there. And on that 7.5 inches, I'll come down by my chest line of 8 inches. And that is my bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5. So I'm going to connect the points together this way. And then I'm going to come down from that shoulder line by 1 inch to get my shoulder slope. I'm using a neck width of about 3 inches, and then from there I'm going to divide this shoulder line into 2. I'll mark the midpoint, and then I'll go in by 0.5 inches, and on the chest line I'll mark my bust circumference measurements divided by 4. I'll connect it this way so that I can get my armhole curve. So I'll go ahead and just label the lines. From the top I have my shoulder line, my chest line next, I have my bust point line under bust, my waistline, I have my hip line, and here I have the full length. This is not the entire full length, but this is the full length of the first fabric. And the next thing to do is to go ahead and mark my darts. So I'll mark my bust span measurement divided by 2, 4 inches on my bust point line, my under bust line, waistline, and then on my hip line I'll go up by 1 inch, and then I'll also mark the 4 inches there, and I'll use a ruler to just connect all the points together from the hip all the way to the top at the bust point. Now on the waistline I'll go out on each side of the line by 0.5 inches, and I'll connect it upwards to the bust point this way, and then downwards to the hip line. That's 1 inch above the hip line, just like this. The next thing to do is to draft out my neck depth. So on this my armhole line, I'll go down by 6 inches. I'm marking it on my armhole line first, just so that I can achieve a straight line, and on the button allowance line I'll go down by 6 inches as well. So 6 inches is the neck depth I'm going to use for this. I'll connect the points with a straight line, and on the armhole area I'll come in by 0.5 inches. So this 0.5 inches I'm coming in by is to take off any excess that might cause gaping. So I'm just going to reduce it by 0.5 inches. And now I'm done with that, I'll go on to mark my circumference measurement. So on my chest line I'm going to mark my bust circumference divided by 4, and I'll add 1.5 inches for sewing allowance. On the bust point line I'll do the same thing. Please note that all the measurements are coming from the button allowance line. Now moving on to my waistline, I'll mark my waist circumference divided by 4, which is 8 inches. I'll replace the dart intake of 1 inch, and I'll add 1.5 inches for sewing allowance. On my hip line I'll also mark my hip circumference divided by 4, and then I'll add 1.5 inches for sewing allowance. Now moving on to the full length, I'll just measure the entire measurement I have on my hip line, and I'll mark it on the full length line including the allowance, and then I'm going to further extend the full length by 3 inches. So the width of the full length is extended by 3 inches because this is not straight. So bringing in my curve ruler, I'll just connect from the chest line to the bust point line first, and then take it all the way to the waistline, and then from the waistline I'm just going to go outward this way to the 3-inch extension I have on the full length line, just like this. So this is sort of like an A line that I'm trying to do here. Now after that, I'll just go on to thicken the lines at the top, and then I'll proceed to make the designs on the lower part. So from this button allowance line, I'll go in by 1 inch, and from the edge there, from where I have the full length extension, I'll come in by 1.5 inches. So I came in by 1.5 inches because I don't want this design to enter into the allowance. So on the hip line also, I'll come in by 1.5 inches, and from that 1.5 inches I'll measure the entire length of that hip line and I'll divide it by 2. I'll just mark the midpoint of that line basically, and then I'll connect from this 1 inch I have here on the full length line upwards to above the hip line, because I went up from the hip line by 1 inch, and then I'm just going to connect that point to the other end. So it is much understandable if you watch it than if you listen to what I am saying, but please just pay attention to what I'm doing. You can watch it again for a better understanding. So I'll just go on to cut everything out this way. So I came in from the button allowance line by 1 inch, and then I also came in by 1.5 inches from the side, which was the allowance I put for sewing. Now I'll go ahead and just divide this waistline here, and I'll go ahead and close the dart on the skirt part. So I'll slash one of the dart lines this way, and I'll place it on top of the other dart line to cover it, and I'll use my sellotape to just hold it down. And I'm going to go ahead and use this pattern to cut out the back pieces before I proceed to finish up with the front. So I'll bring in my fabric again, and I'll fold it into 2. In case I didn't mention, I'm using 2 yards of this fabric and the other darker pink. I have 2 yards each. So placing my fabric on a fold and placing the paper on it, making sure that the button allowance is on the folded edge, I'll go ahead and cut it out, adding 0.5 inches to the lower part, the top and the armhole. In case you're wondering why I still cut out the back pieces with the button allowance, it is because I'm going to be attaching a zipper to the back. So that button allowance is going to serve as the zipper allowance in this case for the back pieces. Now I'm just going to draw out the zipper allowance on the main fabric here so that I can take off my zip bulge. So after drawing out the 1.5 inches of the zipper allowance, let's just call it the zipper allowance in this case, I went inward on the waistline by 1/2 inch and I just cut it upwards a little, and I also went upwards from the waistline by 0.5 inches, still on the zipper allowance area, and I cut it with a slant inwards. After doing this, I'm just going to measure my dart and I will make a notch there so that it will be easier for me to fix it when I'm ready. Now after doing this, this is how it's looking. I'll just place this aside and I'll bring in the fabric again so that I can cut out the skirt. So placing it on a fold and placing my paper on it, I'll just use my pins to secure it down. I'll cut out the lower part, adding 0.5 inches allowance all around. I'm not adding any allowance to the side. I'll add 0.5 inches to the top because I'll be attaching the skirt to the top part on the waist area. And after cutting this out, I'm just going to open it up, and I'll also go ahead to draw out the zipper allowance on this skirt part because the zip is going to extend into the skirt. So I'm drawing out 1.5 inches for my zipper allowance, and I'm going to go in by 1/2 inch and I'll slant it downwards this way, and then I'm just going to go ahead and just trim it off, just a little piece of fabric there, and I'll further take off 0.5 inches also. So coming downwards from the waistline on the zipper allowance area by 0.5 inches, I just cut it out a little bit. So I'm notching the zipper areas so that it will be easy for me when I am sewing. So that is it for the back pieces, the top and the skirt of the back. Now go ahead and slash the under bust line. So now I have 3 pieces for the front. I have the top, I have the band, let's just call that the band, and I have the skirt part. So for this top part, I'll also close the dart on the top. I'll slash one of the dart lines and I'll place the other one on the other dart line and use my tape to just hold it down this way. And for the band, I'm going to be sewing the dart on the band on the fabric when I'm done. So I have the dart on the top and the skirt part already closed on the paper. Now I'll just measure the entire width of the under bust line, stopping at the button allowance area. I think I have about 10 inches there. So I just want to evenly divide that 10 inches so that I can have straight lines upwards. So you can do this evenly or unevenly. So I just marked it with a distance of about 2 inches. And after drawing the straight lines, trying to divide them into compartments, I'll go ahead and number them before I slash them. So after numbering, I have about 5 different pieces, except for the button allowance. I'm just going to slash all the lines this way. After slashing it, I'll bring a fresh piece of paper and place them on it so that I can spread it. I lost some footage of when I was doing the spread, but basically what I did was bringing in a fresh piece of paper and then placing the different pieces I had cut out on it. So it is good to number it so you know which piece is coming after which one. After doing that, I just placed it and I left a space of 2 inches after every piece of paper, and then I followed the entire shape of it, cut out the armhole and every other excess. So that was just how I did the spread. So now I'm done with this. I have 3 different pieces for the front, so I'm going to bring in my fabric again and place it on a fold. I'll start with the top part. I'll place the button allowance line on the folded edge, and I'm going to add 0.5 inches to the lower part, 0.5 inches to the top, and a little to the armhole. No allowance to the side and no allowance to the button allowance area. Now after cutting that out, I'm going to go ahead and slash the midpoint. So because of the button allowance, there's going to be like an overlap, so the pieces of the front have to be separate. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut out the band and the skirt pieces also. So I'll add 0.5 inches to the lower part and to the top of the band. I'll also slash the midpoint of the band so that I can have 2 separate pieces, and I'll go ahead and also notch the dart area so it will be easy for me to sew. And now cutting out the skirt part, I'll add 0.5 inches to the top and 0.5 inches to the lower part all around. I'm not adding any allowance to the side nor to the button allowance. So after doing this, I'm also going to slash the button allowance area so we can have 2 pieces of the front skirt. Now I'm also going to go ahead and cut out lining pieces for the band, 2 separate pieces, and also for this skirt part, I'll cut out a strip of fabric that I'll use to turn the button allowance area and the lower part all around. I also went ahead to cut out lining pieces for the top part, though I didn't show that here. Now moving on to cut out the skirt, that is the skirt that is going to be under. I'm going to use the same pattern paper I used initially to cut out the first part of this skirt. So this skirt is going to have 3 separate parts, though they are going to be attached together eventually. So I'll place my fabric on a fold and I'll close this button allowance area because I don't need that here for this skirt that is going to be underneath. So this skirt is not going to have any division in the middle. And I'll just fold the button allowance and place that folded edge on the folded edge of the fabric. I'll use my pins to just secure it down. And now from the waist, I'm going to measure 6 inches downwards. So this skirt, the skirt that is going to be under, is going to also start from the waistline and is going to have some gathers. I don't want the gathers to start from the waistline because I don't want that fullness around the waist. I only want the fullness to be around the hip area. So I'm going to go down by 6 inches. So I want the first part of this skirt, that's from the waist to 6 inches. I want it to be a bit straight and not really full. So the 6 inches I marked there is just perfect because the gathers is not going to be showing outside of the pink, the light pink fabric. That's the first fabric I cut out. Everything is going to be inside under the light pink fabric. So as we go on, you're going to understand what I mean. Now, what I just cut out is for the front part. Now, I'm going to go ahead and cut out the piece for the back. So I forgot to add my zipper allowance to this back piece because the zipper is going to also extend into the skirt, and I didn't add that here. So please do well to add your zipper allowance if you would, but I was still able to work with this. Now that I've cut this out, where I have the 6 inches marked there, I'm going to measure the entire width because there's going to be some gathers on there. So the entire width of that area is 26 inches. Now, to cut out the gathers I need, I'm going to multiply 26 inches by 2 and I'll add 10 extra inches to it. So I'll measure out 26 inches first, measure out another 26 inches, and then I'll add 10 inches. So this is the entire width of the gathers. This is what I'm going to gather to just the front part. And I'm moving on to get the full length of this skirt. So from my shoulder to my waist is 17 inches, and the shoulder to the full length of this dress, the entire full length, is 38 inches. So from 17 inches, which is my waistline, to 38 inches, that entire length is 21 inches. So 21 inches is the length of this skirt. So it's the length from my waist down for the full length of the skirt. Now I have cut out 6 inches here, excluding the allowance. I have cut out 6 inches first, which is the first layer of this skirt. Now the next thing I'm going to cut out is the rest. So the entire length of the skirt is 21 inches. I've cut out 6 inches. So if I subtract 21 from 6 inches, I have 15 inches left to cut out. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out the gathers with 15 inches. But now this gathers is going to have 2 steps. One is going to be 10 inches, which is going to be shorter, and then the other one is going to be the entire 15 inches. I really hope you understand what I'm saying. So I'll cut out the first step of 10 inches. I'll be adding 1 inch for allowance. So in total, I'm cutting out 11 inches. Now, after cutting this out, what I have just cut out here is for the front part, just for the front. So this 26 inches I multiplied by 2 and added 10 inches is just for the front part of the skirt. Now I'm going to place the fabric unfold again. This my fabric is on a fold of 4 in total, just so that I can maximize my space. And then I'm going to place this other one on top and cut out the exact same thing. So this second one I'm cutting out is going to be for the back. So now that I've cut out the 10 inches, I'll go ahead and cut out the 15 inches. So this 15 inches is actually the main length. This is what is making up for the 21 inches. So adding 15 inches to the first step I cut out, which was 6 inches, is going to make up 21 inches for the main skirt. So the 10 inches I cut out is just like an overlap. It's just going to be on top of the 15 inches. It doesn't add anything to the length of this skirt part, right? So I've cut out the first one for the front, and I've gone ahead to cut out the second one for the back. I also added 1 inch for sewing allowance, so everything was about 16 inches. So placing the 10 inches on top of the 15 inches, you can just see how it layers. It's like a step on top. So the first one I cut out 10 inches with 1 inch allowance, and the second one 15 inches with 1 inch allowance, making up 16 inches. So I'm just going to make a gather stitch at the top, and I'll continue with the sewing in my next video, as this video is already too long. Thank you guys so much for watching this video up to this point. Please do well to give it a thumbs up, and I hope to see you in my next one. Bye.